I'm going to show you now how to create a pivot table. So first thing we need to talk about is the source data that you're going to base the pivot table on. Now there's a few very simple things to kind of follow when it comes to your source data. First of all, your list needs to be a vertical list. So your headings need to be at the top, your data needs to go down. As much as possible as well, this list needs to really be as transactional in nature as possible. So the more detailed the list you have, the more you can eventually do with the pivot table. And there's no hard and fast right or wrong when I say level of detail, but you know, if we take this particular list here, this has already been summarized, because can you see in a given region or a given quarter for that product, that one line could actually be 30 different sales. So it's already been summarized. So we lose the ability, because it's been summarized to this point, of being able to maybe break this list down by, you know, the day, the week, the month, and in the region maybe by the town or the county, for instance. But really doesn't mean you can't do a pivot table because we've got a vertical list. It just means it limits us a little bit as to what we can do. The next thing is every single column needs to have a heading. Now in some versions of Excel, if we had a list with a gap like this, Excel will literally spit its dummy out the pram and it won't let you do a pivot table, and you'll get a bizarre error message like invalid reference range or something to that effect. In later versions of Excel, it's a little bit better. It will create the pivot table, but you just won't be able to use that column in the pivot table itself. So the main thing there is you've got to try your best to make sure that every single column has a heading above it. Now that being said, all we do is dead easy to create a pivot table. Highlight from the headings all the way down to the bottom, making sure we scoop up all of the data. And then after that, once we've done this, we go to insert at the top, pick the first option here called pivot table, and it will pop this screen up here. Now me personally, I click OK to this box and it is brilliant for my purposes. But just to let you know, there's two main sections to this. This section here is where are you going to grab the data from. So this is picking it up from what I've just selected. Or I can use an external data source with a connection. So if I've connected to another Excel file or a database, for instance, or if you're using Power Pivot or Power Query, you can use the data model. And then down here, and I'm just going to drop that back to be based on the data I've highlighted. Down here is where do you want to put the pivot table? New worksheet, so it'll create a new tab, or existing worksheet, and you can pick a particular location. Now again, look, this is just my personal preference, but I prefer to keep the source data away from the report. It just keeps it nice and clean for me. So I click OK at this point. So really, all you need to do, highlight your data, insert, pivot table, and then when you're ready, click OK. And there's my pivot table. Now the key to this is all to do with these boxes on the right hand side of the screen. Now these boxes will disappear if you click on or off the pivot table on the left hand side of the screen. Now I'm going to do a little bit of color coding so I can kind of explain what these boxes are, and I will point as well at these various sections just in case anyone watching the video is colorblind. So I will make this clear as I talk as well, and I'll try and make these contrasting colors so you can see a difference. So just for simplicity, I'm going to completely ignore this box here called filters, and I'm going to concentrate on columns, values and rows. Now if we imagine the rows are the yellow section here, so this is here, so I'm going to type in rows just there, and then this top bit, this is the columns, and this bit here, this is the values. Okay, this is not the nicest diagram ever, but can you see the red section in the middle is the values, the columns are at the top and the rows are on the left. Now the layout of how I've put my colours is very similar to these boxes, but if we kind of ignore the boxes on the right and look at the colour coding, if we imagine this is kind of our report, it could be Down the left hand side we have mention of any products. Along the top we have a time period, and then in the middle in our report we perhaps want to know the total sales or the total cost or the total stock holding, for instance. So this is very much a high level view of what a report would look like, and these boxes here are kind of laid out in that same way. So that's the first thing about how you generate a pivot table. You have the position of the boxes. So if you drop something here, it goes at the top, drop something there at the left, drop something here, it goes in the middle. Second thing is, what kind of data do you drop into each box? Now this is very much a rule of thumb, not the same every single time, but it's very, very close each time you do it. If you drop something in the values, you are looking for this item to be really a number. If you drop something into the row or column, you are looking for this most of the time to be text, but let's just replace the word text with descriptive information, because whatever I drop in the values is going to try and do maths. Whatever I drop in the row or columns is going to try and summarize by group by even. So it's going to give you one of each item. So I'm just going to get rid of this color coding so I can show you what I mean. Now, and again, it's not every single time, but generally speaking, numbers in the middle, text either side. So I'm going to grab something which is very much text, product, and I'm going to drop it into the row. And what you'll see there is it gives me a list of all of the products, can you see, going down the left hand side, because that's where I put it. If I put product in the column, can you see that is now actually putting the products along the top. So where I put it in the column or the row it's just personal preference, it's position. If I now grab the sales and drop that in the values, can you see that is now adding up the sales per each one of those products? And if I drag product up to the column, can you see it splits it that way? Or if I put product in the row, it splits it that way. And I could add more than one thing, can you see, into, one thing in the row, one thing in the column. I can also add more than one thing into the rows. So can you see I put region beneath product and it's subdivided it. And if I no longer want to see anything, I just drag it out. And can you see I can start again? Also, this values box, if I pop the arrow down on sum of sales and go to value field settings, I can pick the different types of maths that I want. So the default is a sum, but if I go for average and then click OK, can you see this is an average sales value? Or if I pop the arrow down, value field settings, max, click OK, that's the highest sales value. So I've kept this nice and simple. I've completely ignored the filters, which I will look at in another video, but that is a little bit of a background of how to create a basic pivot table and also manipulate the layout of that pivot table, obviously excluding the filters, which we'll look at in another video.